do. The one thing I did have a burning desire to do, I wanted to have one step in a direction that made me feel more human and real, and that was I wanted to take my liberty to vote.
Conversation today on politics and current events, but let's load the clip and start our conversation. Alan, tell us a little bit about what your first impression of civilian life was after being released, and what was most important to you.
Civilian life after being released was it was I won't say a mild state of shock. It was shock. It was anxiety. It was depression. It was extremely difficult. It was really difficult.
It's hard for me to imagine. That's a time period that's my entire life. You know, I was born in 91. And, you know, you having to come out of that must... I could imagine it would, the shock, you know, especially just how everything's changed and
yeah, like all these things that
the internet,
exist.
smartphones,
prison, the internet, like I said, little things people take for granted, like how to use a microwave, or just those, you know, that people signs they have for you to cross the street. I couldn't time that. I mean, I grew up in a world where there was no vehicles driving around, so my sense of timing my anxiety would be so high that my heart would be racing that I couldn't build up the nerve to step off the curb to try to cross the street by myself. I couldn't do it because I didn't have any idea of what kind of times thing that those the flashers were on with the people. So I was like, I don't know if I can make it across the street. And when a vehicle came by me, I almost wanted to get against the building and just ball up, because just having a car coming past that quick, it seemed like it was going to end up on the sidewalk. I was going to hit me or something. It was a hard adjustment for me because I wasn't used to any of that, and I couldn't ride more than like a block or so on anything because I would be so nauseous. I always had to throw up. I got motion sickness, so I was taking these horrible pills, Dramamine. It was, I think a bug would have probably tasted better than Dramamine.
Right.
Probably.
It was horrible.
What year was this?
I came home in 2021.
2021.
Yeah, and the whole world was different. I remember, to this day, I've never tried to eat a peanut butter and banana sandwich again, because I tried to make one. I had made it. Like I said, I had no idea what the numbers or buttons were, so I pushed a 6 thinking, okay, maybe that's 6 seconds, but it was 6 minutes. So I put this banana and peanut butter sandwich in the microwave on a plate. I go over to the tea thing to try to make me a cup of tea. Well, when I get the tea done, I turn around. I can't see anything. The whole place is white. All this thick white smoke. So
oh my gosh.
Thinking I started a fire, so I run over to the microwave. I yank it open. There's this pool of bubbling caramel on a plate. So naturally, I panicked. I threw water in there. That just made it even worse. So now the fire alarm is going off and everything. I'm thinking I'm burning the place down, trying to heat up a peanut butter and banana sandwich. So I said, okay, no more microwaves for me. And it took me a couple of years to get the courage up to want to even try to use a microwave again. After I didn't want anything to do with microwaves after that.
Yeah, I mean, I know that even me, when I find a new microwave, if you're at someone else's house, you're like, they don't make any of the instructions between all of them the same either. So,
well, I never got to see any instructions. That was the bad part. It was like, just figure it out. So I remember having this analogy when I came home, like I was trying to think about how to describe how I felt I felt like I had been some caveman they dug out of the ice and just unthawed and said, okay, go on out there and survive.
Remote control television.
Not a chance.
Right.
I didn't know how to use a remote. It was just
totally
such
new.
an annoying thing for me to try to figure out. Like, why does this thing have all of these buttons on it? What's the purpose of 50 buttons on a remote. So I just pushed it to the side. I said, you know what? I don't need to bother with that. I wanted an old TV that still had a rotary dial or something, or even like the phone booth. I told my brother, I said,
Right.
I don't want the phone. I called it a pocket phone because I didn't know what to call a cell phone. I said, I am sick of this pocket phone. I'm done with it. I don't want anything to do with it. He said, you're going to need that. I said, no, I don't. I don't need it. I existed all this time with that. I said, I don't want it because I just couldn't figure out. I'm looking at little kids doing all this stuff with it, and I couldn't even turn it on.
I mean, I look at this thing and I'm just like amazed at how everything that it can do. But I could imagine just looking at it and not having any of that experience. I'd be
None
like,
of it. Never seen one.
It's-
They didn't exist. There were no such thing as cell phones or microwaves or any of that stuff. The first digital watch was made the year I went to jail, and it was just a cranberry face. You push a button and it would light up red numbers. So I didn't understand phone. None of that stuff. So I was just like, okay, I don't need to bother with this because I had too much on my plate already to try to learn, and I didn't want to put anything more on there that just made it even harder for me.
What
Fun
was the
fact, actually, my grandfather had one of those first digital watches. He was very excited. Like, he was a child of World War II, so like
I
he
get it.
was like, I remember my father telling me about that, the first digital watch, and he like went out and bought one. He thought it was the coolest thing. Sorry, I just needed to say that.
yeah?
'Cause since you mentioned it.
Yeah, that's a new invention too. And then there were the watches with the video games on them.
There was no video games because there were no home computers or anything
Right.
at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So it was that stuff just didn't exist. I was
And
in a world that I clearly felt like I did not belong in.
what year did you go into prison?
1976,
1976.
the bicentennial.
The bicentennial.
I came home in 2021.
Yeah, and
Not a clue.
I mean, it's wild to think of all the things and movies and references and
Yeah,
stuff
like
that we
the
go
CD
and
players and all that stuff. That stuff. Everybody had 8 tracks and cassette players. There were reel to reels. There was none of that other stuff. None of that exists.
And the Walkmans and the compact
No.
discs happened in the
No,
80s.
there was none of
yeah.
that. It was either you had a transistor radio or you had a carrier around radio. There was, it was just too much on my plate. It was too much to do. The one thing I did have a burning desire to do, I wanted to have one step in a direction that made me feel more human and real, and that was I wanted to take my liberty to vote. So
Voting.
much so that it was cold and I really wasn't sure where I needed to be, and I rode a pedal bike from Fairview to Erie to the courthouse to vote for the first time. That's how important it was to me. I was freezing. My ears were hurting, my hands were hurting, my feet were hurting. I didn't care.
You
I
rode
wanted
your
to
bike
vote.
15 miles.
More than that, coming from Fairview. I lived all out on Manchester Road, so we almost at the back end.
Okay.
Ooh.
Just say almost going into Girard. So I'm riding a bike early in the morning, still dark, all the way to Erie to the courthouse, just to vote. It meant that much to me to vote. And so I think I brought it up in while I was waiting. There was a group of us outside because we were all there so early. I was the first one there, and then everybody else. And we were talking and how important it was. And I was telling them how long my ride had been to get here. And she asked, "Well, why would you take a suffering ride like that?" I said, well, "This would be the first time in my entire life that I've ever had the liberty to do this." So I wanted to participate in this, and it was important enough for me to want to make that journey. So I made that journey. It was a no-brainer for me. Like, I am not going to sit home and not vote, not have a say-so in what's going on in politics and things like that, because they now involve my life. Where in prison, the only thing about politics that involve your life is that you are just a commodity. People make money off of you. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
You don't get anything else to do that human beings do. You don't get to donate blood or anything like that. Like, God forbid you'd even want to do something like that. It was an enormous impact on me that I've never ever got beyond that feeling. They were asking for blood donors. They really needed it that year, and I just wrote medical because I wanted to do that. I said, well, I'm thinking, well, suppose my blood actually keeps someone alive. They really need this particular kind of blood. So I wrote a request slip to medical saying I wanted to donate blood to this blood drive, and then I got a disposition back saying that you're a prisoner. You're not allowed to donate blood. You can't do it. And that was such a disconnect for me. It was like, man, they don't even see me as even a subspecies of human. Like, I am not allowed to do what a human being does. I shouldn't. I'm not allowed to care enough to want to donate blood or something like that to help someone that really needs it. And it just blew me away. And I said, all of the prison is a 64 point something $billion industry.
Mm-hmm.
They get paid per person. Well, at least when I was in jail, the least amount of money they got paid for anyone in prison was $46,000 a year. You're not even going to see 6,000 of that in a year. Your medical whatever is not going to even allow you to be able to use 6,000 of that for anything.
Yeah, and
If you were sick and you needed something, commissary was every 2 weeks. You go to medical, and they'll say, "Oh, well, just put in for commissary and order it from the prison store, and in 2 weeks it'll come to you." So they didn't care about your suffering at all. That didn't matter. It never mattered. So I used to think a lot. I said, "Wow, these guys most of them have such little time. They're going to go home. Why do they dehumanize them so badly and then turn them loose and expect them to go function normally?" I couldn't understand why they had to groom people in that way to where they were able to function if they disconnect versus not being disconnected. I mean, it's not an easy thing to be a human being in prison.
and
It really isn't. You have to put your all into it. It's difficult. I mean, it makes you a strange person because people don't see that. They're not used to that. They don't just. It's an ugly environment.
And there's a hierarchy inside. Certain people are given a little bit more scrutiny depending on the charges that brought
Yeah.
them in.
Yeah,
And
that I can't even put a number on how many times I've seen some teenager get raped because he had a sex crime. Like I remember I would like look away from my door, just walk away from the door, like, why do I always have to see this? Why do I have to hear it? Why, you know, why does this have to exist? Why do they have to? I mean, and you know, they couldn't get in to a room and do what they wanted to do without an officer pulling the lever down to let them in there, or opening up the box where the lever is and turning his back so someone else can do it and let him in there. But it was a cold environment.
it was a joke that, I mean, something I heard from a school resource officer as a kid, you know. I was in trouble for something stupid, nothing bad. And I didn't even get in trouble because but like the resource officer thought, oh, I'm going to intimidate this kid. And he made a joke. He's like, are you going to end up in my hands where you're going to be in prison and your asshole's this big? Like, and I think about that and I'm just like, this guy is making a joke, you know, and he doesn't even know what I did. You know, he doesn't know anything about it and just thinks this is an acceptable part of the punishment. And it really isn't. Like, this is not okay. And it's something, you know, and we see the profit motive for prisons, you know, and we start, you know, I remember hearing about the Kids for Cash in the 2010s where they had that judge go to prison for
The eastern side of Pennsylvania.
yeah, and he was putting kids in prison for longer sentences and getting kickbacks from a private prison
Oh,
for
absolutely.
filling beds.
Yeah.
And because there's a lot of rules that say like they have to keep so many beds filled and all kinds of stuff, and it's just a system that allows for profit seeking, you know.
Well,
and
during those years, like the 70s and things like that, there was a whole different perspective about the hiring processes for prisons. When I went to jail, there was a lot, and I mean a lot, of predatory staff working in prison. It could be your counselor or your work boss. I mean, you know, there was a lot of predators in prison working there. That staff, the people that governed your life, we're predators.
Mm-hmm.
And you're in a prison where we're all kids. What do you do? Who do you go to? There wasn't even anybody you can go tell. You just had to suffer. Had to live it.
That kind of pervasive attitude from the staff really led to the Camp Hill riot.
Yeah.
It was a reaction to how people were being treated.
Yeah. It just got to the point to where what's the worst that can happen now? The worst that everything that could ever happen has already happened, and that was the mindset of most people, because you grow up in this environment where you're abused all the time, man. You get used to it. You don't ever like it, but you get used to it. It's a part of your life. This is the way you have to live. There's nothing you can do about it. Who do you go to? You can't go tell anyone anything. So you just had to suffer. You had to suffer through it all, and that, in my opinion, played a major role in a lot of the suicides that went on in prison. I mean, we're talking about kids deciding that it's better to just cut their throats or cut their veins and just to get a bunch of pills and take them and just killing themselves, hanging up.
And it really
That was
makes
the
us,
only out. Those were your outs. If you wanted to just get away from having to live like that, having to suffer like that, that's how you did it.
and I looked at, how other countries have been changing to a more rehabilitative focused prison system. I think the countries in Scandinavia have been doing a pretty good job
Sure.
at the way they have been focusing on rehabilitation, focusing on getting people the skills they need. I remember watching a video of this guy. He was learning how to tile bathrooms. He was learning to do tile, and they were talking about it, and they're like, yeah, and he was talking about how he screwed up, but he was like talking about what it meant to be able to go out into the community sometimes and try and be part of it and trying to be a better person, and how much that affected him and made him be a better person. And I think that makes the community better, because we're believing in each other instead of just locking people away forever to never, and throwing away the key.
That was the normal thinking in those days, where even after when you go to prison, that's considered debt paying. You are paying a debt to society for some sort of infraction that you may have made to the rules that society governs itself by. Well, people go in and they do the things like you said. They go there and they learn and they better themselves, and then they come out and they are treated like some subspecies. It's inhumane and a degrading punishment that they have to suffer after they've already suffered and paid their price to society. And they've bettered themselves, and they come home and now they just want to be normal. They just want to do what normal people do, and it was really difficult for a lot of people. When people used to come back to prison, those that would come back, and I would ask them, why in the hell would you return to this kind of hell? Why would you come back here? And they wouldn't get it. They didn't get a chance. People had it in their head, well, he's an ex-con or felon, so they've already paid for everything they needed to pay. Like I said, no matter, they've done everything to better themselves while they were there. They could come home as a licensed barber or whatever. No one was willing to give them chances. They couldn't get a start. So that had to be an emotional bomb to come home, and after training and learning all of these things, and you're thinking, well, when I go home, I'll be able to apply and fit into society's norm and be a part of this, but you're still treated like some outsider, like you don't belong.
Opportunities clearly connected with zip code.
Yeah.
And I've always found, especially like after people get out of prison, there's all these rules about working and all these other things that make it nearly that make it very hard for people to get by. And especially with work and other things, and I just and the importance of that towards bringing change to our communities and righting wrongs of the past, especially, I feel is very important. And sorry, I lost where I wanted to go with that.
That
Well-
is I see where you're going with it, and I can appreciate it because that's where the philosophy of reentry, not just as a name or just as a program, but as an outlet for people coming home.
Yeah.
That's where reentry comes in at, because they get out here feeling like you sent, they're feeling like that when they get out here, and the politics of places like the CCC Center, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
they are put through a lot of, in my opinion, inhumane and degrading punishments down there. Like, their priority, if they're coming home, is priority one is a job, because until you get that, you don't get to sustain yourself. So people come home, and that's what they want to do. And if to exit prison, you probably wouldn't know, but in order for a person to exit prison, there is a number of programs that they're going to have to complete before they can even get out. And once they're eligible, they reach their number. Say, this guy's got 10 to 20 years. He get his 10 in. On that 10th year, he's going to have to do all of these programs and things like that, prepare himself for. He's going to be thinking for change, violence prevention. He's going to have all this stuff that he has to go through. He had to do all this. When he gets home, now he's looking to get a job. He's looking to be normal. He wants to fit in. He wants to help be a part of his kid's life. He want to help, raise his kids. So he gets out here, and now they're telling him, oh, no, you can't do any of that. You need to go to this group. Oh, you need to go to that group. The priority for a job is pushed way, way back. And now they're sticking all of these drug programs and all these other things in front of them that they've already had to complete in prison to get home. Therapeutic housing, when they say they do TC before they come home, that's therapeutic housing. They do that, THC, they do that, not the drug, but they have to do that to come home. So they do all of that. They are programmed out. Now they're exhaling. Okay, God, I'm finally here. Now I get to apply the vocational skills that I had the opportunity to learn, and I can do better for myself. And they told, no, you're not going to be able to do that, because you're going to have to go to this group, you're going to have to do this, and you're going to have to do that. And if you don't do all of that first, then you're never going to be allowed to leave the center. They'll just lock I don't know if they call it timeout. I have no idea what they call that, but they'll make them stay in. They have to stay in. So they come home to freedom, and then they're locked up again.
I'm going to have you move your mic a little bit over.
This way?
Yeah, towards us a little bit.
I didn't realize I had it so far.
Oh, you're good.
You're good. Yeah. Well,
It was fine when you were leaning back, but once you moved forward, I wanted to.
You can't wrap your mind around it. At least I can't, because you're going to have to first have an understanding of why people get high. What's the need to do it for? There was so many people ODing down there at that center. Now, you're out here in the free world. Your anxiety and all that stuff should have been left behind. Your depression, all that stuff should have been left behind. They're looking for options, meaning in the things that they can do to go back to prison versus staying at the center.
Because that's a more familiar world.
Not only that, they're being treated so badly down there. They're not, they have these dreams. They have these hopes. They come home, I want to be normal now. I want to get a job. I want to, get a savings account. I want to help with my kids. I want to put money away. They just want to function. They've already been through the I'm a prisoner thing. Okay, you lived that already. Now it's their chance to come home and do things that are moving them forward. And they're always held back from that.
Meaningful employment is the center of vocational
it has to
rehabilitation.
Be sustainable.
Yeah.
You can't force them to places like, I think it's PHB, something like that, whatever it is, the places. They send them there and they give them like $7 jobs. You can't sustain yourself on a $7 job. I mean, the job you get hired for, this is the way it worked with. They may be getting hired out on a job for, just say $16, $17 an hour. But the agency keeps everything except the $7 or $8 that they give them. So if they were getting hired for $18, the agency keeps 10 or 11 and give them 9 or 8. So they got that. They're going to have to pay probation fees every month. So that's money they're getting taken there. If they were under any of those acts that they owe the county or they have fines, they have to pay so much toward their fines. So you're letting them out here and you're putting them into burdens, because if the person learned vocational skills out there, that's what they should be applying out here, something that can move them forward, something that is sustainable for them, versus pushing them to a job that allows them to make money off of the person, and they really don't know what they're doing. So they're out here and you make people desperate. You can't expect them not to do desperate things.
Recidivism.
So don't make them desperate, but they make them desperate.
And we see how, billion-dollar industry, the prison industry, and then we see, in Alabama a few years ago, they talked about how they were having prisoners on work release in prison going and working in fast food restaurants
In the community.
They were able to keep 50 cents of what they got every hour, and the prison kept everything else, but it was just like a profit making system. And we call ourselves the freest country in the world, but we have the largest prison population on the planet.
Yeah, sadly, that is true.
China has over 1 billion people, and they have a similar amount of prison population. Actually, they have a less still, but if you look at the per capita, it's like way down there compared to where we are. I think we're actually number 2. Now, we were number 1. Colombia has beat us out because we have started sending so many prisoners there.
Wow.
In the late 1990s, there was a documentary film called American Chain Gang, directed by Zachary Irving. And it was about the continued existence of chain gangs in Alabama and I think Arizona possibly also. And some of these outdated methods of rehabilitating people that lead to just more and more conflict once somebody gets out. And you were part of the reentry program here in Erie. You were first a peer mentor and then a case manager, and you were connecting people to employment here in Erie. And that seemed to be a really successful part of the program that you were managing.
That made the program what it was, because people knew that when they came home, they weren't going to be uncomfortable. They weren't going to be judged. They were going to be given every opportunity to be successful. And for me, it was really important because I know what the struggle was like for me. I didn't have that to do for me when I was determined, I was pushing, and I had an extraordinary amount of skill sets. And I said, well, I know how to do all these things. I have to be able to apply something that I know how to do.
You spent a lot of time in the library.
Yeah. And learned all this stuff. And those were the things that I came home to do. So I had a complete understanding of what people were going through when they came home, that cultural shock they were going through. Like a lot of them, if they came home, depending on how they lived before they went in, they may not have had any family support or anything like that when they came home. So all they had was our program. So I understood that I was playing a role that wasn't a job. I didn't look at my placement and reentry as a job. I looked at my placement and reentry as a chance to get people's lives on track and give them all of the opportunities that my determination allowed me to have. I didn't want to see anyone fail. I wanted everyone to be successful. So my motivation was, these guys get out here. The first thing to help them start feeling like human beings, I said, at some point in time, you're going to go to a job interview. I'm going to take you to this place where I have a lot of clothes. I have ties with, like Bishop Jones, for instance. There was a men's clothing store that closed in Pittsburgh, and the guy brought all of that stuff to him. So he had this big storage area with that. So we're talking. I've known him for 20-something years. I met him as a chaplain in prison. And he said, Alan, anytime you need clothes for these people, you come to me. So I would tell these guys, let's go get you some suits. Because when you start going for these job interviews and that, I want you to look equal to any other human being out here, not less. I don't want you having pants hanging off and all this other stuff. So I would dress them, and you could see the difference in a person when they're having most of them never had a tie on their neck or suit of so. To give them clothes and shoes and things like that.
Just teaching them how to
it
tie
picked
a
them
tie.
up immediately. And then having taking the time to teach them personal dynamics to understand how you go about sitting down and having a conversation with someone you're applying for jobs. You have to be your own salesman. You want to be the kind of person that people say, hey, this is the person I want to give a chance. I want this person to be here. So they need to learn a lot in a very short period of time. And I would just tell them, hey, it's going to be a little difficult. It's okay if you get a little frustrated, as long as you don't give up. So pushing them and seeing them successful, the more they got successful, because there was plenty of times when guys would come back into the office who were at the center or whatever, and they say, Alan, listen, man, I think I'm just going to go back to jail, man. I can't do it. So I would sit there and I would tell them my life story, what my journey was like, how painful it was to lose so many family members in prison. I mean, you're never going to any funerals or anything like that. So it was just more and more disconnecting. You were constantly suffering a lot of disconnecting. And I just told them the stories, what it was like for me in prison and all of the things I went through in prison. And I said, listen, you deserve the thought that you are not less than any other human being. You deserve to invest your best effort into the people who spent years supporting you while you were in jail, coming to visit you, made sure you had a TV, made sure you had a tablet, made sure you had food. It's time for you to give back to them. Let them see the best side of you. This is time for you to shine, not just for yourself. What about, if you got kids, what about your kids? What are you teaching your kids? So come on out here, man, and just step up. You need to be a part of that area in society that's moving the community forward. That's where you need to be at, and that kind of thinking. When you get, I never got a person a job where they was just stuck at a certain wage. I wanted them to know that you take this job that I'm getting you, there's room for you to grow, there's promotions, and watch them grow, watch them do better. And I had this kid, I call him a kid, he wasn't a kid, but in his mind his name was Henry. He was special needs. He was from New York. He took his parole here because of reentry. The first thing he said when he came in office, he sat down. I said, okay, so what do you know how to do? What are you good at? He said, he said, I'm slow. He said, so I probably won't be able to do anything. You probably won't be able to get me a job. He said, I don't care if I have to scrape bird poop. If you get me a job, I'll do well. I said, number one, you don't ever come in my office and tell me you're slow again. So I'm going to ask you again, if you could pick one thing in life that you could do that would make you happy, what would it be? He said, I would like to drive a truck. And his only motivation was his mother was elderly. He wanted to be able to take care of his mother. So special needs or not, went through all of the things, getting him the grants money, getting him in the classes and all that stuff for free, and then moved up. Well, Henry's now a CDL driver.
Amazing.
And he's taking care of his mom. A slow guy, as he called himself. It was just beyond rewarding to be able to do that, to have the ability in my job that I can give people these kind of qualities to their life. And I can say, hey, this guy's going to be okay. I don't have to worry about him. He's not going to fail. It's beyond rewarding to be able to do that. You see a guy that comes in, you got to talk him from not going back to jail because he can't take being at the center anymore. You say, I'm done, I'm giving up, I'm through. It's just too much. It's under too much pressure. And then you get him through all of that, and then next thing you know is you get a knock on the door. This person has come back from another city with his mother, his kids, everybody. He bring his whole family to meet you because you put him on track. Because he became successful because you motivated him to be successful.
That's gratitude.
And you stayed with him, and man, that's beyond rewarding when you get to see that part of a person's life. Like, this guy's back with his kids and everything. He's got this big, happy smile on his face. Never seen that. And at the end of the day, I get to go home and lay my head down, proud of what I do, proud of my work, because it wasn't. I didn't see anybody beneath me. No one walked behind me. No one walked ahead of me. We all walked side by side. because everything that they would have to go through, I knew. I said, if you have any problems with anything, you come sit down and talk to me about it. I said, because whatever you're going through, I can tell you I've already done it. So come here and let me tell you how to deal with that. If I never sat down and hit them with a gazillion questions and a bunch of paper. They wanted a job. They had these skill sets. My rapport was so great with all of the industry people that I met. I could take them to the job, and then they'll be hired before I leave. So I've done it for a lot of people. Ironically, we became so great at it. We got to the point to where even though probation became our assassins later on and took the program, they started bringing their people to us. I put so many people from probation to work, so many people from domestic relations to work, just helping them out, helping them as well. Grooming the assassins, not even knowing it. But when they needed people to get work, they come to us. Say, hey, I got 3 guys that need jobs. Can you help them out? Bring them to me. And then get them dressed up, take them to where they were going, and come back and tell them, hey, your guys now have jobs. This is where they work at. These are their hours. These are their wages. I mean, we did a phenomenal job at putting people's lives in order because I didn't want people to fail. And I didn't come back to Erie because I wanted to come to a city where there was always shootouts and all that. I wanted Erie to be better. And so my thinking wasn't just for me or just for the people exiting prison. It was for the community as well. If you came to Erie or you lived here and you needed help, if you came through our doors, we gave it to you. Even though there were people who said we should not do that. But at the end of the day, I need to like what I see in the mirror too. So I am not going to leave you desperate when I know I can get you a job. I'm going to get you the job. If that's a problem, that's a problem. But I just go to places like Cloud9 or whatever. I feel really good walking in there because there's people working there and they're loving their life. They got their own place, their own vehicles, everything, and I put them there. So I had a lot of rewards in my work.
And I agree. Like, this is an important part of, the community, after people have served their time, if we are not giving people the opportunity to find work, it's just going to breed more crime because people got to get by. And,
that was the perfect phrase. They got to get by.
They have to get by.
I always had this analogy that I tell everyone. I said, if you don't want people to do desperate things, then don't make them desperate. Because if you make people desperate, then they're going to do desperate things.
The boundaries go down.
What else can they? If they don't have skill sets and you're not willing to get them to a place to where they can get training on the job, I was big on that. Getting you a job somewhere. If you didn't have any skill sets, your boss would be willing to invest in training you for that job because without it, how do they work? How do they success? How do they? They don't exist out here. They can't be successful without that. So I would go to them and I would tell them, hey, this person has already been vetted. I wouldn't bring anybody to you that I didn't trust or know that couldn't be better. I said, you really need to give this person a chance.
There's an interesting historical parallel in Erie with the Underground Railroad. Escaped human beings who found their freedom came to Erie. And in the mid to late 19th century, there was an African-American barber here in Erie. And when people first got to Erie and had a breath of relief, from patrols chasing them and, the long ordeal to get from where they were up to Erie, this barber, this African-American gentleman would give people a haircut and a shave and try to get them a suit so that they could be in society as a proud person and to enjoy the freedom that they had. And now, here in 2026, we still see some of these same social challenges in society. How does somebody maintain their independence? How do they assert their autonomy and their agency? And some of the social work that you were doing to help connect people with jobs on the bayfront or at plastics factories, that's the start. But having your perspective and your experience to guide them into This is how you use a microwave. This is how you wear a suit. This is how you use the television remote. All of those skills make somebody ready to be who they can be.
Reentry. When people said they see it, they're thinking program. To me, reentry was a way of life. You gave people a way of life that allowed them to be successful. And it became one of Erie's best kept secrets, because you don't have any of the high industries here that don't have placements from us. Like Don John Shipbuilding, or McShane Welding, or Erie's Magnetics, or Lincoln Metals. These places, Bayfront Convention Center, you know, Oliver's, Cloud9. I mean, you know, all of the bigger industries in Erie have people that were given those placements from us.
Accudyne.
And they're doing good. And they're doing great. People, their bosses love them. Like, I was so happy about this guy, Rob. It always just hits me in the stomach. He was from a little town outside of Pittsburgh. Both his parents were heroin users. When he got curious, needles are around the house. So he started getting high. He ended up going to jail. He did 10 years. He had a kid right before he went to jail. But the girl didn't want to allow him to have any contact with his kid, because he didn't want anything to do with her, which happens a lot with guys in jail. So their hope is gone as soon as they go to jail. Their kid's out of their life. So he came home. He decided to come to Erie. Rob had never put on a suit. He had never had anybody believe in him. And we sat down and I talked to this guy for probably a week straight. I had him come in every day and I would sit down and talk to him about life. And no matter how difficult things were, if you've worked hard enough, you'll always get what you're looking to get out of life. So I said, you have to sometimes forget about some of your past. You can't always live in your past. You need to put it aside. But I got Rob. He was a good cook. So I got him dress shoes. Actually, I gave him my stuff. I gave him clothes. So he was my size. So I gave him dress shoes, suits, all that stuff. And I said, Cop, I'm taking you somewhere. I never told him I had him a job at Cloud9. I said, come on, we're going to take a walk. He said, well, I got something I want to introduce you to. So we're walking along down the street. We're walking. He's step by step with me. Our shoes are clicking together like we're in the service. And he just said, he said, Alan, for the first time in my life, I feel like a man. I feel like a real person. I said, you are a real man. You really are. He said, so where are we going? I said, we're almost there. So I walk him down there. I already had talked to the guys at Cloud9. So I take him in there. I said, here's the guy that you have to have. You need him. He's a great cook. He's got great dynamics, good personality. You can never even tell he was in jail talking to him. So get him the job. They liked him so much. The owner always sat down with me and said, listen, anytime you bring us, if you're bringing us guys, we'll take them. So anytime you want to bring people to us, you bring them to us, we'll take them.
Right on.
So I would ride my bike in from Fairview every day and spend Saturday walking around the city with him, talking to him, just keeping him grounded, because I knew he was, he didn't really know anybody here. He was a culture shock. So we did all of that. He had his job. And then one day I come in, I didn't see him on a Saturday. So I go down to his job. I say, hey, what's going on with Rob? I walk in the door. The person that was mopping the floor drops the mop. So now I'm looking, and then everybody's got these tears in their eyes. So I'm thinking, well, maybe he got scalded or hurt I'm thinking something minor at work. I felt really terrible about it, because I took him to Arby's and got him this first roast beef sandwich. He said he's seen it on TV all the time. He wanted one so bad. So I take him over there and I get him this sandwich. So he's now working at Cloud9. He's their guy. They love him. They don't want him. He decided to go over to Arby's one night after work and get a roast beef sandwich. Well, some guy was drunk, speeding down 12th Street. A pickup truck hit him and killed him.
Goodness.
He never got to see his kid. He was doing so great, man. He just got cut short. So that was my first success story, but it was the one that hurt the most, because the potential in him was incredible. He was never leaving Erie. Erie had been so good to him. He said, I'm never leaving here. I want to be part of this community. He said, not just a part of this community. He said, I'm going to become a pillar in this community. He said, someday I want to have my own Cloud9. He was ambitious about what he was doing, and it was probably a year and a half before I could go to 12th and Peach after that. I couldn't do it. That's where he died at, 12th and Peach. So I'm thinking, well, Did he lay there suffering in the street for a while? Or I mean, I'm thinking all the worst. I couldn't do it. I just couldn't go that way. Even when I rode to work with someone, I would say, look, don't take me down 12th and Beach, okay? Just drop me off somewhere else. I'll walk the rest of the way, whatever. I just couldn't go to that corner. And
Did they ever find the driver?
yeah, he was drunk. He stole a really good. That he would have been quite an asset for Erie.
Rob.
Yeah,
His name was
Rob Doty.
Rob Doty. Yeah. He worked at Cloud9.
Yeah.
He loved it.
Loved it. They loved him. Everybody loved him. And he was building his life. He said, I'm standing here. Erie gave so much to me. He said, I'm going to give back the rest of my life. He said, I'm going to get my own place, get on my feet. I want to bring my daughter here. He was living at Snow House at the time. They thought so highly of him that when he got killed, Cloud9 thought so highly of him, they gave a generous check to Snow House because Rob lived there.
Wow.
But it just, I was eager to see him finish his journey. I wanted to see him with his daughter and his life because the girl had told her kid that he was dead. As far as she knew, he didn't exist, and she found out that was a lie after he was killed. So he never got to meet his daughter.
What does justice mean to you?
Well, to me, justice should be equally fair to everyone. You know, no one should be treated any less than anyone else. No human being should I mean, realistically, you don't know what people's life stories are, what made them do the things they do. I mean, pressure can bust steel pipes. No human being is that strong. You don't understand why a person is going through what they're going through or why they're doing what they're doing until you really get to know the person. And even in prison, there was this kid on my block that he was always getting infractions, getting wrote up and getting put in a cell. And I just pulled him to the side one day and I said, man, what in the hell is the matter with you? You just constantly keep doing it. Why do you keep getting... And he only ever got wrote up for one thing, doubling up on the meals in the kitchen. I said, this is the worst cuisine in the world. How do you want to eat it twice? I was really hard on him. And then I found out that he did that out of habit because he was the oldest of 4 siblings. He had 3 younger siblings, and his mother was severely addicted to drugs. She would lock them in the house every morning as kids, and she'd go out and do it. He would climb down the rain sprout, down the balcony. He'd go to McDonald's, behind McDonald's, and get all this partially eaten food out the dumpsters and that. He'd take it back, climb back up there, and he would feed his siblings. So that's the only thing he knew. He didn't know anything else. It wasn't that he was being defiant. He was in survival mode. So after that, I never went to store without buying like 100 packs of ramen noodles for this guy and cookies and all stuff. And I would give him and that stopped him from getting all these write-ups in jail. And he ended up doing good enough in prison to where when he went up to see the parole board, they let him go because he wasn't getting wrote up anymore. But all of that was based on his trying to survive because his mother would lock them in the house and he didn't want his siblings to suffer. So even in his defiance, there was compassion. He was doing what he was doing because he didn't want his siblings to suffer. He didn't see anything wrong with taking the risk of falling and breaking his neck. It was worthy to him to do that. But I would have never thought that kind of story exists until I would have asked him, why the hell do you always keep getting in this trouble? You stopping yourself from going home. And then he told me that his mother was an addict and she always locked them in the house. And she would be gone all day, sometimes for a couple of days. But he was the oldest sibling, so he took on the responsibility of making sure his younger siblings didn't starve.
He had this instinct to provide for his family.
So he would go dig into dumpsters behind fast food restaurants and bring food back home and then feed his siblings. Yes, he was taking care of them, and that's why he would double up on the meals because he was used to having to do that to survive, to exist. So it was a no-brainer for me. From that point on, I said, I will always help this guy, always take care of him, help him out. I explained this to the sergeant on the block and everything. I told him, I don't want you thinking he's doing something wrong or illegal because he's getting a bag of food or he's coming out. I said, he's getting this food, I'm giving it to him. And then I told him his story. I said, so, I mean, do you want to push him toward being more of a human being, or do you want him to continue to be instinctive? Live like less than a human being. I said, let's get him ready to go home, man. I said, he's always getting wrote up. for dumb shit like an extra meal, and then he goes up to see the parole board. They say, "Oh, I see you had 3 misconducts since the last time we seen you." So they give him another year ahead. He was just staying in jail because he just had this instinct that this is how I have to survive.
So
So
that was all he knew.
he didn't know anything else, right? And once I realized that, I felt horrible for yelling at him about it, but that was the only way I could get it out of him was to do that. So once I got it out of him, I said, "You'll never ever be hungry. As the rest of the time you're here, as long as I'm here, you'll never be hungry."
You worked in the kitchen too when
Yeah.
you were inside.
So I took care of him. I helped him out all the time.
You're saying at Camp Hill, there's for a while there was a special picnic area, and
In the visiting room.
in the visiting room, and families could bring in food.
Yeah, it was called Family Days.
Family Day.
It was during the summer months, and it was the biggest incentive in jail. I've seen people have someone walk up and spit in their face, and they would just turn around and walk away because they knew they had a family day coming. So it was an incentive for people to be way less violent, way less responsive to bad things. Just, hey, okay, well, I'll get to go hang out with my family and eat some food and, feel like a human being for a whole day, take some pictures. So it was a peacekeeper. And the family day had more power than any rule or any infraction, or nothing was equal to that.
Just the
People-
promise of being able to be with
to
family
be a human
again.
being for a couple
Yeah.
days, to be able to be with their family, to watch their kids grow, watch their nieces and nephews grow, or watch their parents age. They got to do all of that stuff. So Family Day was one of the greatest things ever invented, and I think that was just such a sacred thing. They should never have taken it.
And once they took it, that's kind of what led to the Camp Hill riot.
Yes, that was the final straw. There was nothing else to take. When they took that, there was nothing else. So
There was
people
no
had
incentive left.
There was no incentive for anything. Nothing. And then it didn't help the fact that 2,000 people were exiting the yard that day, returning to the housing units, and the sergeants out here fighting with a person on the sidewalk, and you couldn't get 2,000 people to pretend they didn't see that. That's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
So he became the short fuse on a stick of dynamite by doing that. And that just turned into be something super ugly. I would have never thought that him having that fight on the walk would turn out to be something so ugly and so bad that it took decades for me to shake the effects of that off.
And I mean, that's a big piece of American history with how big that riot was. What was it?
Yeah.
The third largest?
The third biggest riot, third worst riot in the entire United States.
And that's wild to think about. I really didn't even know about it. It happened before I was born.
I'd heard about the Attica riot in New York.
Yeah.
When was that Nelson Rockefeller was the governor at that
Yep.
time? Definitely one of the symptoms of the for-profit prison complex, and the wages inside the prison. All these different incentives. You mentioned the Family Day, and being able to get good assignments inside the prison, and being able to do engraving. That gives you a little bit of a special position among both the staff and the other inmates. That means there's some family, some normalcy
Yes.
that people can
And
negotiate.
that's the one thing that people need to have, even in prison. If you make the conditions so unbearable that they don't have that sense of normalcy of feeling like a human being, then what are you training them to be? I mean, it's not going to be the person you want living next door to you.
It's programming. Yeah.
So you just, like he said, he brought up a good thing when he said that they were teaching rehabilitation was not the priority in prison when I went to jail. No one cared about rehabilitation. What they cared about was skill sets. They offered you so many different vocational skill sets. You could learn to be anything, bricklayer, machinist, whatever you wanted to be, carpenter, it was all there. I mean, it wasn't theologian, it wasn't just a book. They had an area where they actually set up in the jail where they would build a house and then take it back apart. They taught you everything, so people could learn everything they needed to.
The
function.
OSHA standards, how to run a forklift.
Yeah, they would
All
teach
those
them all of
things.
that stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, you would ever think, I think my very first job when I was working with Joe, Now, this is prison, mind you. My first job was repairing locks. I learned how to put the tumblers and all that stuff in locks. So I'm in prison. Why do I get the bill locks? But we did all of that and put all the gears and the doors and all that. Like if something broke, I could take care of it. I knew what to do. But I learned all that from Joe. Joe was my guy.
Those skills will last you a lifetime.
Yeah.
And now that you're here, now that you're outside, you had this experience with the reentry program, the Erie County Reentry Support Services.
Yeah, we didn't call ourselves that long, stupid name because
Right.
the EC, or whatever it was,
ICRISA.
were way different than what
Right.
we are.
Right.
That was not what we became.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, it seemed like there was resentment that, okay, you had the concept of this program, but we took it to a benevolent level. So what's wrong with that? Why is that a problem? That became such an issue. Like, well, and our independency came along with that. Industry didn't go to staff agencies anymore. They called us. I don't even recall them how many times they would say, "Hey, Alan, we need 10 people. How long would it take for you to get us 10 people? You'll have them all this week." Or it was just people needed apartments. Well, we got 4 people that need apartments. How long would it take? I could walk these people to the landlord because I had that rapport with them. I go talk to the landlord and say, "Hey, this guy needs a break. He's doing great. He's got his own place." I said, "Hell, even though I'm not supposed to do it, if he's falling behind on his rent or something, he's not getting high or anything like that. I know that." I said, "You come to me, I'll make up the difference until he's on his feet." But we humanized everyone,
Right.
not dehumanized them. So I'll never understand why the reentry program was taken and given to probation. My first impact, and it was not a good one, when we were forced to move from underneath the Y to probation, which is where reentry had went. I went to the kitchenette first because I always want to clean that area. That's where I'm going to leave my food. There was a note on the door from their director, Chris, congratulating them for having locked up an enormous number of people. What are we doing here? I mean,
Yeah,
we didn't belong there.
that's how I've always been. When I started learning about, police brutality and stuff like that, that's, the thing that I was taught. A lot of police officers are very focused on their numbers.
Yeah.
And, how big their numbers are, because that means they get promotions. And then it's a bad way of doing stuff because you end up getting officers who are
Emotionally calloused.
and
They have to not care.
they care only about their job prospects and not about
Yeah.
the impact they're making on the community. And it was always a troubling thing to see, also growing up around police officers and how they talked about stuff just was always a troubling thing. It's a big reason I have
There's something
family today.
predatory about that work ethic that leads to situations like an interceptor police cruiser
Oh my God.
hitting somebody on a bicycle.
I have gotten myself to a place to where I've learned to mentally block certain things out of my head. But I don't think I'll ever get that picture out of my head of seeing an interceptor rushing up onto the sidewalk and sending a guy in the somersaults that's riding a bike on the side. And my first thought when I seen that was, my God, suppose some little girl just came running out there to get her kitten or her puppy at that time, or some grandma was pulling her grocery cart down the sidewalk going home. I thought about all of the bad things that could have came from that. And then I said, okay, well, what good could have came from that? And I couldn't come up with anything good that could have came from that. Like, who does that? I mean, maybe I'm a little bit gullible about a lot of things, but it's protect and serve. Protect and serve does not include an interceptor plowing up onto the sidewalk and somersaulting someone into the air. I mean,
The concept of
the
due
guy
process.
didn't have a gun. He hadn't killed anyone or anything. He had an infraction of some sort. But I don't think there's any context for risking killing someone because they have an infraction.
Yeah,
Or-
and that's the type of callous attitude, like you're not here to dish out your idea of justice on
Yeah,
people.
that's not justice.
And it's something I saw personally in my life. I've talked about it on this show before, but when I was about 17, we had a friend of my mother's who was sitting at our house, and she was a state trooper. And this was during the 2009 G20 in Pittsburgh.
Mm-hmm.
So they had all the world leaders here, and there was big police presence because there's always big protests. And she sat at our kitchen table, and she talked about how upset she was that she had gotten a promotion at her job, and she wouldn't be able to go use all her nightstick skills on the protesters.
Yeah.
And I remember
Yeah,
my
that's-
father looking at her and going, I believe the Constitution says you have a right to protest. And she went, well, they don't have a right to riot. And my father replied, well, who gets to decide that? And she gleefully replied, me. That was the thing that made me start looking into police brutality. And then I started learning about Rodney King and other events that had happened before that, and seeing this just so up close and personal, and how people will excuse that behavior as well because it's their friend or family member. And it was always something that really disgusted me when I saw it. And
Recent legislation sponsored by Representative Ryan Bizzarro and County Councilman Rock Copeland had a hand in it for body cams. That's one step. But what are your thoughts about a police review board for incidents of brutality?
There should be a review board, and you would have to find people who are liberally fair, and they do not have the good old boy kind of attitude about things. They need to be human beings, and you don't have to necessarily come from law enforcement or anything like that. You need to come from a thought that everyone's a human being first, and not always whatever you think they are second. But we're all human beings first. So you treat everyone like a human being.
We're all
first.
human beings first.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
human beings first.
Yeah. Well, we've almost come to the end of our time today. Today is Thursday, July 16th for the Common Liberty podcast. Alan, Mr. Brown, you've given us some really tremendous insight and inspirational stories about surviving the prison complex, the for-profit prison complex, and what reentry really means to bring somebody's humanity back into their life as they grasp their freedom.
It's beyond a blessing to help someone find their humanity like that, to become a human being, to start feeling like a human being, even if they never felt like one their entire life because of the way they were treated. We gave that to them. And that was always my motive, to give that to them, because once they felt that way, they think that way. If they're thinking that way, then they act that way. But sometimes it's just sickening to hear some of the things that you have to hear. And you have to say, wow, I understand it. So we had this thing in office. Jake, our director, if a person came in office automatically that had done a lot of time, 10, 15, 20 years, and that, they didn't even try to talk to them. They would say, go get Alan. So I know if he called me to the front office, I'm getting someone who's just done a lot of time in jail, and their adjustment is not going to work if they got to do it on their own. So I was like their coach, because I could get them, show them how to narrate through all of that and get them to where they needed to be, because I just don't like to see people fail. I don't want to see people fail.
None of us can do it alone.
No, we can't.
Well, thank you again so much, Alan, for your time and your wisdom. We definitely want to keep the names of people like Rodney King or George Floyd or Breonna Taylor or Mumia Abu-Jamal or Leonard Peltier as examples of people who've come into conflict with this for-profit prison complex, and we have to remember their humanity, and we have to remember the people who they are.
And you generally don't hear the stories about the people like that. Like you said, Leonard Peltier, for one. This man done decades, and he was innocent. We had it here in Pennsylvania. There was a juvenile lifer, Kevin Brinkley. He did 43 years in prison. He was not guilty. The DA waited until he retired. He was the Philadelphia district attorney. When he retired, he sparked his humanity, his human nature. He went to the state parole board and said, hey, at the time when I locked this person up, convicted him, I knew he wasn't guilty of this crime. I want to do something about it now. He helped get him out, get him a job, get him a house, get him on his feet. But regardless of all the gifts he gave him, he couldn't give him what he really needed. When Kevin went to jail, his child was a baby in a blanket. He came home a grandfather. How do you give that back to him? You can't. There was another one, Sam Harper, also from Philadelphia. He did around 19 years in jail. He was treated so badly, and during one of those abuse sessions you get a lot when you're in restricted housing unit, the guards took his fingers and put him in the door and slammed the door on him and cut 2 of his fingers off. He wasn't guilty of anything. The person who said he did this was forced by her parent. When she became mature, old enough on her own, she initiated the fact that this wasn't something that should have happened to him. So, but he had his own store and everything when he went to jail. So he was a pillar in this community. You know, he helped out the community, had his own store. So when he got out, the city of Philadelphia was generous enough to, put him back on his feet. But you can't give back the years that he suffered when his kids were young too. They were grown when he came home. You can't give him those fingers back that the guards slammed in the door and cut off. I mean, never once in all of the years I was in jail with Sam Harper, I've never seen him without a smile on his face. How could you do that? You're in jail doing a bunch of time for something you didn't do. You're being mistreated, and you find the energy, the human energy, to smile every day. I don't remember not seeing him smile, ever.
The Innocence Project really does point the way in cases like that for Sam Harper. Yeah. Well, my name's Jeffrey.
And I'm Eric.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to this very special episode of the Common Liberty Podcast. Again, we're here today with Mr. Alan Brown, and load the clip. We'll see you next time, everybody. Please like, share, and subscribe.
And stay clear of those wildfire smoke. Wow, that's rough.
Oh, my goodness.
Ugh, I've been coughing the whole time.
Yeah.